Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. We are live, and you know what we're here for. It is the Contender Series. It is back in our lives, and we've got to break it down. It's 2024. We've been doing this show since 2021. We've been talking about these Contender Series fights, and I got to just disclose, in terms of my favorite fights to break down throughout the course of the year, I don't think there's anything I get more fired up about than Contender Series. The reason being, not a lot of people look into these fights as deeply as we tried to do, right? There's like a select group of people in the market that care enough to look into these fights, and they're prospects. There's people with not a lot of footage. There's people that are a little bit low key under the radar. And so those are the kind of spots where I've typically done very well on the Contender Series, but I also just have a blast trying to project who are the real prospects, who are the phonies, and just seeing what happens. You know, it's a fun, interesting puzzle, and we get it on Tuesdays, right? A little bit of early week conflict resolution. So God bless you all for being here. Thank you for your time. But you know we couldn't do it alone. You know we got to bring in the heavy hitters. And if you've been here rocking with us since 2021, I want to give a special shout out to you. But if you're new here, then I hope that you guys enjoy the presence of Gordo Gambles as much as I do. One of the sharpest minds in this space in terms of DFS, in terms of MMA breakdowns. My brother from another. Welcome back.
What's going on, man? It's nice to talk to you. It feels like it's that time of year when Dana White Contender Series rolling. I'm hitting you up in the DMs, man. We've been doing this for 3-4 years now, and I always look forward to it. One of my favorite times of year, and I'm just happy to talk fights, man.
Absolutely, brother. I'm happy to do it with you. And we got the sharpest chat in the game rocking with us live. I want to say right off the rip, guys, if you don't mind, do us 3 quick favors. Here's the 3 quick favors, and we're getting right into the breakdowns. Number 1, drop a like on this video if you don't mind. It helps the algorithm. It helps other people find the show. And we're trying to get a little bit of thing going here, right? It's the first episode of the year. Want to start off strong. Want to get it going. Second of all, I want you guys to get subscribed, because if you're looking forward to content like this, if you're looking forward to UFC breakdowns, this is a great place to get it. So make sure that you get subscribed. But also, guys, go to that description box down below. Find the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. It is one of the most critically undersubscribed channels that I've ever seen. Sharp content each and every week. Highly produced, high quality. Guys, check it out right now. Go get subscribed. You will not be disappointed. Plays and Fades. It's in the description. You can search it as well. Thank you guys for the time. That's the housekeeping. Without further ado, let's open it up with a banger. They did not say, let's start off with the shittiest fight on the card and work from there. They said, no, let's get it off rolling right. First fight of the year on Contender Series, undefeated Tuan, 6-0. This guy also has an amateur background, right? Loner Kavanagh, a guy, his amateur background maybe wasn't as impressive, but why is he here? He's been having viral highlight reel knockouts. Also 6-0 as a professional, come through the Cage Warrior scene. This is a fantastic fight. It's a great scrap, but I would be doing a disservice if I didn't give the floor first to our guest, my brother Gordo. How do you feel about this fight? First fight of the night, first Contender Series breakdown. My brother, what do you think?
Oh, man. You know what? When we're talking about breaking down these fights, we're in August. We're doing this one on Sunday night. And when you're doing the research for this one, it's like, okay, let's dive into some regional scene tape. Let's see what's going on. Sometimes they're not that good. Sometimes they don't deliver. This fight's going to deliver. And I'll tell you this right now. These are 2 prospects who could go out here at 125 and have some success in the UFC. You throw them in there, and I'll shout out my Canadian brothers, but you throw them in there against Malcolm Gordon or anybody like that in the division, and they're smoking them. These guys, I do think, have potential to have some success out here. And I am really intrigued why this fight's opening up, but you could not be happier to start off Dana White Contender Series with this fight here. It's a really fun one, 125, and I do think it's one between 2 guys who could have some promise. You look at the guy here in Loner Kavanagh, the favorite coming into the matchup, a guy who has had those highlight reel knockouts like you've mentioned, fighting over there in Cage Warriors. He's got some really good in and out movement, only 25 years old, and he has utilized that knockout power, that good in and out movement. And the first thing you realize when you watch that tape is the hand speed. He's got good hand speed. He's got good footwork, and he's able to put that all together. And against those opponent in Cage Warrior, have a lot of success. He fights pretty smart. He has a very good tools with the leg kicks and fighting through processes, and he's able to mix the fight up. He does have some decent offensive wrestling, but he doesn't use it too much. His bread and butter is the in and out movement, the boxing, and the potential leg kicks on the feet. He does have 3 of his 6 wins by knockout, but I mean, the guy is a decent minute winner. He is a guy who can go forward and go out there and throw some good volume to win optics. There's some decent power on the other hand. Then you look at Antoine Ho. right? LFA guy, 23 years old, a ton of power in the hands. And this guy is a human highlight reel. He's got a ton of forward pressure. He will throw with fight any intention, and he's fun to watch. I think when we look down at it too, this guy is a guy who's still improving with the technicality, but he can throw bombs. He can go out there and he can really make like the crowd up. So when you look at a guy like this, I think Antoine Ho also has a decent ground game. I think he has the ability to be very aggressive when it comes to it, maybe a bit more submission over position, but a guy who will deliver these finishes. I know I'm talking a lot. I know I'm excited for it, but when it comes down to breaking down this matchup, I really do think it's a matter of the better minute winner, the in and out movement, a guy who's willing to slow the fight down and lower Kavanagh versus a dangerous guy here in Antoine Ho. Antoine Ho has the fight ending an opportunity. He's got really good looping shots, a ton of power on them, quick hand speed. And although Lord Kavanagh has some phenomenal in and out movement, he leaves his head on the center line and he's there to be hit. So I do think someone like Loner Kavanagh can be hit and clipped by someone like Antoine Ho. And I do think if a finish materializes, it's probably from the Antoine Ho side, not only due to that power on the feet, but he is a pretty dynamic submission grappler if he gets those opportunities. At the end of the day, though, I do think it's a spot where if we're looking at the line, I think if I'm playing Antoine Ho, I'm probably playing him inside the distance, probably playing him by KO, because I do think at the end of the day, the better minute winner here is Loner Kavanagh. So gun to my head, I'd probably lean towards the skills and the well-rounded skill set of someone like Loner Kavanagh. But man, that finish is on the table for Antoine Ho. And if I get a good enough number, I will play that with no hesitation.
You know, my brother, this is a fight where I couldn't get an easy read here, right? I think that, first of all, they have a lot of similarities in their style, right? And when you think about fighters like that, that's always going to be something that could lead to a little bit of a gridlock, right? Like both these guys like to spin. They like to take a lot of chances on the feet. And I think that when you look at an Antoine Ho, he's a lot more confident in terms of his hands. I think that Loner Kavanagh likes to set everything up behind the kicks, get to the low kick especially, get the guy off balance, and then he starts to open up with his shots a little bit more. And he did actually show that good, wrestling pressure in that last fight that he had in the Cage Warriors scene, especially in that third round. I was impressed by the cardio. He was pushing it late into that fight, still looking for the finish, trying to work deep into the decision there. So I think he's a guy that's got pretty good cardio, but he's wearing damage in a lot of these fights. And for Antoine Ho, the one thing I noticed that he's very good at is when he does get buzzed, when he gets rocked on the feet, he closes the distance very fast, right? And one of the things I also noted, the MMA Lab, they just have this like really good hotbed for talent right now in this division. Sean O'Malley, Marcus McGee, among others, right? Mario Bautista. You just think of the killers that are in the room with this guy all the time. And that seems like a great place to train and get better. He's got a lot of experience now, both in the LFA, but also on the amateur scene. And you look at the Loner Kavanagh side, there are some concerning, pieces of footage in the amateur record, especially, and it's not really as glaring on the Antoine Ho side. When he's faced adversity, he's been able to deal with it. He's been able to come back. And one thing that I do like for the Loner Kavanagh side in terms of his improvement, the guy who submitted him, he's one of his training partners now, right? So he's working on that aspect of his game. He's trying to improve those things. Great Britain Top Team is also a pretty solid team in its own right. He's got good skills. He's got the ability, I think, to draw out some counter opportunities here. But I think Antoine Ho has shown a pretty solid chin. And when he does get buzzed, like I said, does a good job of avoiding real damage, right? By getting a hold of somebody, taking them to the ground, or creating a frenetic exchange. And the knee bar that he got, the rear naked chokes on the regional scene, those are things that could translate to, potential potent grappling offense in this spot. And we're constantly reminded at times that, fighters can be great from all over the world, right? There's all kinds of different skills you could bring in, but oftentimes the best, wrestlers and grapplers are coming from certain parts of the world, and it's Dagestan and the United States of America, right? It's like Russia and the US. That's a lot of the great grappling talent that we see. Obviously Japan as well, and insurgents recently, but I'm just talking about, like, broadly speaking, Brazilians as well with the jiu-jitsu. But when you're just talking about pure like wrestling pedigree, who's getting on top in a lot of these exchanges, it tends to be American fighters that have been tested with a lot of American wrestling talent constantly throughout their training sessions, whereas there might only be one or two people that can wrestle at a high level in some of these MMA gyms around the globe. And you can only get as good as your environment, right? If there's not this people that can push you in that regard, when you get exposed on these higher levels, it can be a lot more difficult. So I think that's the biggest susceptibility for Loner Kavanagh is how does it translate outside of Cage Warriors? How many guys have we seen put in a great, effort in Cage Warriors, in the grappling especially, Gordo, and then when it comes to the UFC, that skill set just doesn't necessarily translate. And that was his weakness prior. It's something he's been working on. He's trying to improve that area of his game, but definitely a susceptibility. We got a special guest. I'm happy to announce our boy Piers, rounding out the trifecta, the king of the regionals, the king of the Contender Series. Welcome back, my brother.
What's up, guys? Y'all ready for a brand new season of Tuesday Night Fights? I know I am.
Hell yeah, my man. What do you think of this opener, brother? We got Antoine Ho and Loner Kavanagh. I think it's a fun scrap, great fight. Both guys going to take a lot of risks with the spinning shit. What do you think's going to happen here?
Well, my first thoughts are this is criminal that these two have to fight each other, man. I've been more so a big fan of Kavanagh because, I'm a big Cage Warriors guy. And ever since he landed that pole counter on Ryan Morgan back in the day, there's just something about this kid that I thought he was special. And it's nice that he's finally got his chance in the UFC, but they're not giving him an easy fight here in Antoine Ho. I mean, I think Antoine is very dynamic in his own right. I mean, both these guys have a hell of a highlight reel, and I don't know. I'm gonna go with my gut. My gut says Loner is special. I think this kid has top 5, top 10 potential in the UFC. It's like not many guys on the regional scene can strike like him, and his takedown defense is very elite. And Ho has good grappling. I mean, I think wrestling was his base, but it's a tough fight to get a read on because it's like these guys are so good, and it's like you're trying to point out flaws in each of their games, and it's just hard to really see much. I guess I'll say Loner. He's probably more polished, more seasoned, and Ho is a bit more spazzy, but that could lead to Ho finding a finish. I do think the under could be interesting just solely on the fact that it's like both these guys fight at a high pace, and we have seen Kavanagh, to be fair. He's been dropped multiple times. And I don't know if he's chinny or just the way he enters the pocket leaves himself open. But yeah, under plus 180 right now, 2.5 is not the worst look, but yeah, I think the price is pretty accurate, honestly, but I don't blame Antoine Ho bets as a value play.
And if you think he can D up takedowns, I mean, that would be the thing that I think opens up Antoine Ho to getting knocked out. I mean, like he's still a guy who takes a lot of chances, keeps his hands a little bit low when he's exchanging. And so he gets buzzed a couple times in these fights, but he's just like very quick about grabbing a hold of somebody, taking them to the ground, initiating that exchange. But if he's not getting the takedowns, it's like, yeah, you can grab a hold of somebody that, what is that, 5 seconds, 8 seconds before they separate, start throwing again. So that is an interesting dynamic in this fight.
I gotta ask, does this fight count as Asian on Asian violence? I see my boy Loner's repping the Chinese flag, but you wouldn't know if you didn't have it on Tapology.
Yeah, and he's fighting out a Great Britain top team as well. So he's doing his thing. He's got a bunch of different flags. And Antoine Ho, he represents, I believe, Vietnam, but he's also a guy that's training out of the United States and getting, great work every day here. So I suppose it is in name only, right? But in practice, I think you got two guys that are both well prepared, and either one of these guys getting a UFC win in the future, not surprising to me, right? So it's like if either of them are to lose here, it's not the end of their story. They're not like, oh wow, what a failure, it's all over. It's like, man, they're just putting iron on iron and finding out who's ready right now. The loser of this fight is going to be in the UFC within 2 years, I would imagine. You guys all feel the same way?
Yeah, and I don't want to get too nitpicky on this fight here. I think that the under is probably a good look. I think if the good KO line comes out, something like Ho can be played here as well. But the one line I will be looking at, and maybe this is getting too fancy on it all, but maybe some Antoine Ho finish only if that line's good enough plus money, because I do think more times than not, Loner Kavanagh has the minute winning opportunities, being the more polished technical fighter of the two. But I think Ho throws with fight ending intention, and you look at a guy like Kavanagh who has been rocked, who does keep his head in the center line, and although he does have that footwork to get out of the way, he is someone who I do think is more susceptible to damage in the spot here. So I think if that line comes out with a decent amount of juice, maybe I'll play that, but maybe not get too fancy on the first fight of the first card of Dana White Contender Series this year.
Absolutely. Last things I wanted to note here, guys, are just some of the intangibles in terms of the height, the reach, things like that, because I don't think that we noted it off the top. You're looking at a Loner Kavanagh here who's standing 5'4", so not very tall, right? But he does have actually the reach advantage. So despite being the smaller fighter, he's got like a half-inch reach advantage. I think that the size should be relatively equal here, but I am interested to see them size up a little bit at the weigh-ins. Both these guys look like they're in tremendous physical shape. They both look like they have a good athletic build as well. Just a couple of things from my notes. But with that being said, folks, we can move along to the next fight. We got Jose Delgado taking on Ernie Juarez. And I must admit, this is the fight that I've done the least research on. I believe this was added short notice to this card. And when you're looking at Ernie Juarez, he's a guy that seems to me like a pretty classic wrestle boxer. He's out there, he throws a handful of low kicks, but most of the time he's looking to like take somebody down and bludgeon them. And if they want to get back up, he's trying to punch them again. He's trying to take them back down. Very aggressive guy. He's willing to take the back, look for the chokes as well. On the Delgado side, I saw one fight where he got hit with a right hand that looked like the fight was over in the first, and he was able to rally there, right? He's a tough kid, was willing to get back up. He does a lot of crazy spinning shit in his own right, takes a lot of chances. But when he's on top, he's got good ground and pound. I think that's probably the best part of his game. He's very violent from there. He's pretty controlled as well. Will pass the positions. If I had to criticize Juarez, I think I remember a couple times in the footage him like falling over the top and getting a little too aggressive. Wouldn't surprise me if he like rocked him, got on top of him, fell over the top, and then ended up getting beat up a little bit underneath. They could kind of beat the shit out of each other. I feel in this fight, a little bit of give and take, but both these guys have a lot of defensive mistakes. Delgado's the bigger fighter here by a pretty substantial margin, but I think that the other guy is not afraid at all to close distance. Juarez, like he understands the assignment, right? He's coming forward, he's swinging bombs, he's going for takedowns, and if he dies, he dies. But it's like that's kind of what it seems like he's going to bring in all his fights. So this also seems to me like a fun scrap. I'm excited to see it play out. We'll kick it to my brother Pierce. How do you feel about this one, man?
Yeah, I'm actually circling back to this before I got put in on this podcast. So I don't have any bets right now, but if I was looking for a bet, it's probably the underdog here and Ernie Juarez. I'm not sure when I'm gonna make a position or if I will, but Delgado's good, man. I mean, he's out of the MMA lab. We got back-to-back MMA lab guys here coming in on short notice. He's good. I mean, the commentary for LFA's last fight put it pretty well. They said he looks like he flows on the feet, and I can't help but disagree. I mean, agree more. The dude strikes well out of both stances, good kicks. He's very diverse. It's almost like he's just, like they said, flowing. He's not really thinking about it. He's just letting it go. And I mean, I think Delgado is a good striker. It's just my issue with this matchup is it's like he's good, but he's kind of can crushing a little bit. And I want to see him extended in fights. And one thing Juarez is good at, well, I think he has a lot of flaws in his game. He's someone that's persistent to march forward, get in your face, and kind of wear guys out. And I guess in theory there could be a Delgado top time path. He could take down Juarez. If I had to point out one thing about Ernie I don't like is he can't get stuck on his back, and I don't really like his get up game. So if Delgado goes to the grappling, that could be an issue for Ernie. But I can't tell if I want to play this pre-fight or wait for a live line because I do think Ernie's success is probably going to be later in the fight. He's going to throw hands early. We saw in his last fight against that Brazilian in LFA. Dude threw down and found the knockout. So I guess if I were to bet this fight, if I like the Delgado side, I'm looking at the under 1.5, which is like plus 165 if you think he's going to steamroll. And then maybe Ernie pre-fight, maybe small, and then look to live bet after 5 minutes.
What an astute breakdown. I'm glad that you popped in, my brother. Gordo, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I actually feel pretty similar on this one. This is a spot where I think if we had a full camp, this fight was one that wasn't announced on short notice, and we looked at both these guys here, I think Delgado is a fine prospect. I think he checks a lot of the boxes, fighting out of the MMA lab. They're having a very good offensive skill set. He'll go out there, he'll be flashy, he'll throw some powerful leg kicks, he'll switch stances, and like you mentioned, the hands down low, he's flowing, he's constantly moving forward. He's being a fun striker, and I think he's a fun guy to get behind. But we have seen flaws in the guy, right? We've seen him not only go out there and be dropped, but we've seen him taken down, we've seen him controlled. And I do think, although he's a very fun, flashy style, the adversity is something that I still like to see him face. Yes, he rallied through in one of them as well, but he's also someone who can be dropped, who can be put in these precarious situations. And I think in a spot like this, when not only is he going up against a guy who's pretty tough and durable, but he's doing this on short notice, it's pretty tough to justify playing him at the price tag he is right now, over minus 300, a guy who is not say not perfect at this point of his career. I think you look at Ernie Juarez, you guys broke him down pretty well. He's not the most technical, but he'll go forward. His cardio's held up so far. His durability's held up so far. He's going to look to make it dirty. He's going to look to brawl. He'll look to shoot those takedowns. And I think he's a guy who's just been a consistent product. Is he someone who's necessarily going to go out there and be deserving of a minus 300 price tag against nobody? Probably not, but he will go forward. He will make a name for himself. And I do think in doing so, he's someone who's also had a good amateur career and the ability to go out there and perform. So I think in this spot here, it's dog or pass. Like I said, gun to my head, I'd probably lean towards someone like Jose Delgado because he is the flashier A-side product of the two, someone who I do think they could build around. But so many things are going against him here, and I do think that it makes for a very interesting opportunity to bet the underdog this week, especially if this line continues to climb. You never know with these heavy favorites being parlayed early on. So I do think something like Ernie Juarez is the place I would look to go this week, but it is a very interesting fight.
Absolutely. I think in terms of the concerns for the Juarez side, when you go back and look at the Diego Bigelow fight, just a lot of moments where he's having difficulty, establishing himself over a fighter that has a 2-3, record as a professional at this stage of the game. So obviously it was early on in his pro career. You're looking at guys to develop over time. I think he's shown a little bit of that, but it just showed me he's still a guy that can make some pretty green mistakes. And when you're talking about huge contender series price tags, they're just not really things that I believe in more often than not. There's some times where it's like, this guy's going to take him down. He's going to get every position he wants and he's going to finish the fight. That's kind of what it needs to be for me to believe in these huge prices, right? Because striking just in and of itself, there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of variables. There's just shit that could go sideways on you. And when I'm looking at Ernie, he is a guy that is like, probably a little more athletically gifted. He's going to have access to the hips on a taller opponent. So that could open up his takedowns here. But again, if you can't consistently hold down the top position, then it's like you got a big guy in front of you who's willing to go out there and attempt a lot of strikes, a lot of crazy shit too, right? If you're evasive, if you try and stay all the way in or all the way out, if you're all the way out, he's trying to head kick you from a far distance. He's trying to do a lot of things that make it difficult to just relax. Right. And when you're a muscle bound fighter and you use a lot of explosive energy, my other question is like, how does it go if he starts to face resistance here? It's difficult to project, like you guys mentioned, with the short notice elements. But like, if he's not just taking him down and dominating and beating him to a bloody pulp in the first round, then it's like you probably have a Delgado here who's going to continue to make him work over the course of the fight. And we might just see him slow down a little bit. So I don't really feel bullish on these kind of price tags, especially with a guy who doesn't have that many fights against, great opposition. Feels to me a little bit steep. So for me, clear dog or pass situation, but I will watch a little bit more tape. Like I mentioned, this is one that I was taping right before we got on, and least amount of tape I was able to watch on any of these matchups. So not my strongest opinion, but it does feel to me like a unanimous panel saying dog or pass is enough to keep me off the favorite. Next up, we got Lopes taking on Mikheil Sazhiniani. I have butchered my brother's name here, but Gordo, we'll kick this one off to you. Bruno Lopes is obviously coming back off a disappointing result last year. We tried to tell everybody, don't you sleep on Branson Imperial. And then he's looked like shit in the UFC, but my man went out there and put the beat down on Bruno Lopes and cashed the tickets for the underdog backers. So now Bruno Lopes gets a second crack at it. How do you think he does?
Yeah, Lopes is going to be that familiar face in this matchup. Was a huge underdog in that last one because he is someone who has had some success. As a former champion over there at LFA, he has shown that he can be very dominant. He's a guy who does have the ability to go out there and look very good from top control, even work in some striking the feet as well, but can dominate in those clinch positions, can look very good from those aspects there. He is going to be the A side of this matchup and someone who has been led up to another favorite spot, and it comes down to seeing, can we find some value going against him here? Now, I want to preface this breakdown by saying if we had UFC 5 players, if we were able to control Bruno Lopes and go out there, I think he can very easily win this fight at a very high clip. I think he has the ground game. You look at a guy like Sazhiniani, he's someone who I don't think has fought the best level of competition. I don't think who has the best ground game, someone who is a smaller stature, but a guy Sazhiniani who will throw very explosive shots. And I think when it comes down to it, if we had full control of these fighters, Bruno Lopes has the skills to take him down to the ground and have his way with him down there. And I do think for that reason, he is someone who is favored in this matchup because of it. But when we look at the way these two want to go out there and exchange, I think it leads for a lot of very interesting opportunities from the Georgian fighter here in Sazhiniani. He is a guy who is very powerful, 12 of his 13 wins by knockout, and 10 of them coming in the very, very first round. Although low level competition, he is someone who will go forward, who will throw with just reckless abandon, a ton of shots, a ton of power, whether it be 3, 4, 5 punch combinations going together and looking just to knock his opponent's head off. And it seems to someone who, although he has maybe a lack of technicality, he's a brawler and he has the power to really go out there and hurt a lot of people. He just explodes, right? And I think in a matchup like this, where we have seen a guy like Bruno Lopes go out there, be hit, be dragged in these spots where he has a slower hand speed, not really get off on his wrestling game, and be caught in these certain situations, not really have as much resiliency as you'd want to see in a guy who's favored like this. I think it allows for a guy like Sazhiniani to have success. All this to say is I think Lopes should win. I think he has a clear path to victory, but I do think there are spots where he can go out there and be caught. And because of that, it's a fight I'm really intrigued in taking the under. I do think it's one where it's going to be a brawl for as long as it lasts. Sazhiniani is going to go forward. He's going to look to take his head off. But if it gets too reckless, I do think Lopes can take him down to the ground and control him down there. It should be a very binary matchup. If the line continued to climb, maybe some viability on the round 1 KO for Sazhiniani, but a fight where I am targeting the under, it should be a burner for as long as it lasts.
Hell yeah, man. A lot of the fights that I watch from Sazhiniani screamed under to me as well. The guy goes out there and fights pretty crazy. The Murtaz Tala fight, he was like brawling with him, taking him down. They wrestled the shit out of each other in a very short fight. So he definitely goes out there and spends a lot of energy in round 1. And that's the kind of thing I would like to see for an under, certainly. Pierce, how do you feel about this matchup, my man? Does Bruno Lopes get the ticket on his second try?
I'm gonna be honest, this is the one fight I haven't looked too in depth on. I watched a couple of the Georgian meat butchers fights, and I can just tell that he looks a bit fraudulent, if I'm being honest. He's powerful, I guess. He throws hard, wrestles heavy. He's a power wrestler, so that's like his game. But I've seen the story tape and regional fights on these Georgian meat butchers. They are shit off their back. And if Gordo's saying Bruno has a top time path, then maybe we look for a submission prop there. But I do need to look more into that. But yeah, I think safe to say Bruno's probably not being brought in the second time to lose before I get in depth on the tape tomorrow.
Oh, Pierce, you done taking the words right out of my mouth. Listen, if I'm thinking about this fight conceptually, after watching the Taha fight, it's Bruno Lopes by submission is like my first instinct on this fight. It looked like he had never been in like a belly down armbar situation before. Like the guy just was like out of his depth, and then Taha's hitting him with the mouthpiece and like kicking him after the fight, like just unbelievable. And the announcer's so biased for Taha as well. Everything going against my guy. No favors done for him, but you just look at him and he looks like a very like stiff fighter, which is the problem with Bruno Lopes, right? He's like a stiff fighter. He's like awkward and upright on the feet. That's where his biggest liabilities are. And that's why I liked Brenson Iberio. He's a guy that's going to go out there and like try and knock your head off. That's all he does. So it's like he might, try a little bit on the ground or whatever if he gets taken there. But like basically he's a knockout artist. That's what he does. So it's like he's going to go out there and swing. I was like, yeah, Bruno Lopes just keeps his head right there. So to your point, Gordo, in terms of the under, like it could always happen. He's a knockout waiting to happen. In the UFC, he will get knocked out again. But he does also have the skills to win fights, right? Like he could go out there and decision somebody, pressing them into the fence, taking them down along the fence line. And he was minus 800 against Brenson Iberio last time, who I do think is a more dangerous striker than Mikheil. I think that Mikheil, the danger for Bruno in this fight is just getting into like brawling exchanges, because then it becomes a 50-50 fight, right? And then you're not getting value at the number. But if he goes out there and pursues takedowns, based on what we saw in the Taha fight, I don't think that this guy's wrestling is as good in reverse, right? Like he can go out there and get a takedown, but number one, he's not holding good guys down, I feel, right? They're getting back up to their feet. And then it's like, what happens when he gets an extended wrestling exchange as Taha redrags him, gets on his back, and then instantly falls into a submission? Like it just did not look good transitionally. It looked like he was like 2 steps behind. And in terms of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, like he should be able to go out there and do whatever the fuck he wants to this guy if the fight is on the mat and he's on top. And so for me, I don't think his wrestling is like bad. Like I think Bruno Lopes can go out there and wrestle with guys. That's not his problem. His problem is he gets knocked out and exchanges a little bit too much. So it's like, that shouldn't be the problem here, I feel. So more often than not, I would favor him to win this matchup. I think they bring back most fighters on Contender Series because they're trying to get them to the UFC, and they fucked up, right? And we had said last time, I think they fucked up. Like they think this is the ticket because Brenson Iberio can get out grappled, but he's going to go out there and swing with this guy, and it's Contender Series. Oftentimes we see people fight against type. If you've already got knocked the fuck out on Contender Series once, you're going to come out there and be like, I'm ready to show off my boxing. I don't think so. I think he's going to come with headgear, shoes on, like, all right, let's go. Off the line, he's going to shoot a takedown, try and get this guy grappling with him, as far as I can tell. And I just think the longer they grapple, the more chance that Bruno Lopes wins the fight. So ultimately, that's my read on this one. And does anybody else have anything they want to add here?
I'll just add on to that one there too. We talk a lot about his last performance, right? The difference between Sazhiniani and a guy like Ribeiro is, although I'm not the biggest fan of Ribeiro. Ribeiro's 6'3". Like, he's a bigger dude. He's a guy who can go out there. He's a guy who does have submission wins on his record. A guy who can go out there and compete. I think there is a clear discrepancy on the ground for someone like Lopes, and although it maybe was still there last time against a guy like Ribeiro, I think it is a bit more evident here. With that being said, Lopes is still a guy who, as you mentioned, stays in the pocket way too long, was willing to exchange even though he has a slower hand speed. I'm hoping he learns from his mistakes and takes the route down to the ground here. But if he doesn't, I think there are paths for both fighters to hit this under here. I think it's where it should be a fun fight for as long as it lasts. But there is a clear fighter here destined to have success, and that's if it hits the ground, it's Bruno Lopes.
Hell yeah, man. Bruno Lopes by sub if it opens at a good price. That's probably the thing I'd look for here. Next up, folks, let's see what we got. We got Meng Ding taking on Rami Hamed. Why don't we start this one off with my brother Gordo? How do you feel about this matchup? I think Meng Ding was the fighter who was supposed to be here. Rami Hamed taking this one on short notice. And he's another guy representing like 3 different flags. You start going through this guy's profile, you'd be very confused. But I think that it's an interesting fight. I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. Big discrepancy in terms of professional bouts. But I think when you crunch it down to like quality of competition, it equals out a little bit. How do you feel?
Yeah, let's just put some respect on Meng Ding here. The Ruthless Assassin. There's a fighter nickname for you, all right? If people won fights off nicknames, the guy could have some success here. But like you mentioned, this guy is 34-8, 29 years old, has a kickboxing record as well. This guy is just a fighter. Now, the big red flags here, the side of Meng Ding here is that level of competition. He has fought a really weak level of competition over there. The Chinese scene, a guy who was originally supposed to have a different opponent in this matchup and was a large underdog, now facing a short notice opponent here in Rami Hamed. And you look at a guy in Meng Ding, someone who is now favored in this matchup, a guy who seems to put on fun fights. He will be aggressive. I think he has a lot of power in his hands. He will go forward. He's got some decent size for this weight class as well, but someone who, let's say, has a few flaws on his end, right? He is susceptible to leg kicks. I think he can go out there, be hitting the feet as well. I think his ground game is something that could be worked on defensively. And although he has a shown glimpses of wrestling success, it's been against a lower level of competition. So I think a guy in Meng Ding, someone who can put on fun fights. I think he does have a lot of power. I think he's got a good boxing style. But I do think this matchup here, he's facing someone, Rami Hamed, who is going to be a better level of competition than he's fought in a while. The issue I have here, Rami Hamed, is not only is he coming in on short notice, but he's someone who we haven't seen very often. Only one fight in the past, 2.5 years. A guy who's been relatively inactive, and a guy whose style doesn't really scream to me like, oh, I should be favored in a lot of these fights. Rami Hamed is a guy who I think keeps his hands down low. He is someone who does have a high-level kickboxing background, but a guy who is just willing to, I don't want to say brawl, but get into these weird exchanges where he is mixing up levels. He's throwing different combinations. He's working the body really well. He's throwing some spins and stuff like that too. But a guy who is still questionable when it comes to level of competition as well. Someone who still can be taken down to the ground. Someone who I do think when it comes to fighting the UFC, if Meng Ding puts on his wrestling shoes here, Rami Hamed is not a good fighter off the ground in my opinion. So I think these are 2 guys. If we compare this to Loner Kavanagh and Tuan, I think these spots should be switched. I don't think these guys rate out that well long-term in UFC careers, but I think it's going to be a fun fight for as long as it lasts. The way I ended up looking at this one is, yes, Meng Ding has the boxing credential. I think he can land a powerful shot. I think he wrestles offensively. He could potentially have success, but I don't like the level of competition. I don't like his susceptibility to kicking. And I think when we match up a power boxer versus a distance kickboxer like Hamed, who works all levels here, I think Hamed's able to go out there, work and land some leg kicks. And I do think it's a spot where if Hamed wasn't on short notice and he did have more activity, I would be more bullish to play him. But as an underdog, I might lean towards him in this matchup.
There you go. So a lean towards the underdog in this matchup if he had a little more preparation. So a little bit of concern about the short notice nature of this contest. The one thing I do want to note is that Rami Hamed was scheduled to be on Contender Series last year. He was forced to pull out of that fight, unfortunately, due to an injury. But it's not like he wasn't a guy on the UFC's radar. They tried to bring him in for a fight like this in the past, and it just wasn't able to work out for whatever reason. They're bringing him in this season, but in maybe less than opportune circumstances. So let's see if it works out for him here. Pierce, how do you feel about this matchup, my brother? Do you think there's any betting value to be had?
Well, they were bringing him in to lose last year against Raymond Magomed, but yeah, this fight, honestly, I think this could be one of the more violent fights of the night. I'm actually looking forward to this. This Meng Ding guy loves to just, he lives up to his nickname, the Ruthless Assassin, because this dude does not give a fuck. He just will walk forward and just stand and trade in the pocket. And I think the line is probably accurate. I mean, I'm getting the vibe on a lot of these fights on the card. The line's accurate. I think Meng Ding has better optics. I mean, Rami Hamid's a good striker. He's got that karate style where he bounces in and out, good low kicks, good switch kicks to the body. But I just think Ding's just going to walk him down. And Baron, if his calf can stay alive, because I mean, Rami's calf kicks are probably the one thing I'm concerned about if I were to lay the chalk on Ming Ding. But if he can avoid the calf kicks, I think Ming Ding's just going to break him late. I liked his fight against this Tyler Naraji guy back in the day. For those of you that are familiar with Naraji, he's killing it right now. Coming off of, he'll probably be in the UFC very shortly. He was on road to UFC last year, and him and Naraji just stood and traded for 3 rounds. And I think that showed that Ding can take a punch. And if Hamid's not deterring him from marching forward, I think it's going to set up for a late finish. I'm hoping we get an under 2.5 in this fight. We see the under 1.5 is like plus 160. And I want to play that. It's tempting, but I'm a little bit worried because when I like to play unders, I want both guys to have a path to get the under 1.5. And I don't really think Rami's going to be finding a knockout early. If anything, I think it's all Ding that probably has the finishing upside. So maybe finish only for Ding, look for a KO on him. I just can't help but think that Rami's a bit too soy and Ding will just walk him down. But I do find it funny because you take both these guys and like you want to fade them with grapplers, and neither of these two are grapplers. So we're gonna get 2 guys just trading it out on a Tuesday night. But good fight. Looking forward to it.
If you want to play the under, money has come in on it, so it's now down to plus 145. I think people are tending to see the same way you do. But interesting. Look, I did have that circled as well, so I like what you mentioned there. I don't think either guy wrestles, but they might benefit from doing so.
If I were the Chinese dude, Ding will probably be the one to wrestle if there was anybody. He has gone to it on the Chinese regional scene, but yeah, I can't help but think Contender series, both these guys are just going to stand and trade for a contract.
Fair play, my man. Listen, I got to be honest, because I always try and give independent analysis, right? And you guys are making a fair enough case that I have to like go back, watch a little more footage, definitely think about this one closely. But I did not rate the footage that I watched on Meng Ding. And frankly, I didn't watch that fight that you mentioned. So I'll go back and watch that one in particular because I just looked at that guy's record. I think he's like 11-1 now as a pro, sensational record. And especially given the circumstance, I mean, a lot of these fighters on the Chinese regional scene have so many fights that they end up losing a bunch of them along the way. And that is definitely the case with his record, right? I've seen him drop the number of times, like just like you said, reckless brawling, like just like hands here, like swinging huge hooks, and that it looks awesome when they land, but it's also just like if you're fighting somebody and they're pretty technical with their strikes and they're picking shots, like they're gonna be like, oh, I can hit him right now, like it's just like he's very predictable. I feel when he's going with his offense, he's like coming forward and throwing. Like those guys, the benefit is they're gonna do damage if you don't stop them, right? If you don't prevent them from coming forward, but it is just like, okay, I know he's going to come forward. I know he's going to try and throw something big. So if I measure it, that's kind of just like opening yourself up to be countered. And I do think this guy has a bunch of experience on the feet. That's where he's comfortable, right? So you put this guy on the ground, he looks not very good, but he's also a BJJ brown belt. I was looking through his credentials. He's a black belt in kickboxing, taekwondo. I think he won some like Thai boxing gold medal for the Arab world or whatever in 2010. So it's like the guy's been striking for a long fucking time, right? I don't think it's going to be like, blowing his mind that somebody's trying to pressure forward into him. I think he's just going to try and land really hard counters and kick the fuck out of his leg. And I just did not like what I saw from Meng Ding. And frankly, like I wouldn't be surprised if either guy had grappling success here because they're both really bad from the footage that I was watching, just like giving up easy subs to guys that didn't look that good to me in the tape. But I will watch it a little closer. The other thing I wanted to note, things that strike me as like weird about somebody's record, he's fought the same dude 5 times. He's got like a 2-3 record against the guy And he's like a guy who's like a middling journeyman with like a 23-17 record or something. And he's literally fought him 5 times. And he's gotten submitted by him. It's like they just fight every 2 weekends. Like whenever I see shit like that on somebody's record, I'm like, huh, that's interesting. Like it just doesn't strike me as like, best practices for somebody in a professional career. And so I'm going to do more research to the respect of my guests here, but I was just not impressed by Mending, and I was surprised to see, a substantial favorite price. And I was way more surprised to see 81% of Topology voters on him. Like, it just seems like he's the easy click this week. A lot of people in my chat saying that as well. So I'll do more research, right? You guys are catching me early in the process in terms of research, but yeah, I'll just say I start a lot of times by watching people's losses. When I'm doing Contender Series research, if they have them. If they don't, then I have to go look for the adversity otherwise. But like, I was just seeing a guy getting blasted all over the place, and then every time it hits the ground, he looks like he's clueless. A 2-4 career to the submission, so just not very good. And I haven't seen much evidence of this BJJ brown belt, but Rami Hamed is only 33, right? It's not ancient history, and he's been out for years. He's training at MMA Masters. Like, could he show a little bit of a better product in a Contender Series fight that's like make or break for his career? Yeah, I think he probably could. So those are, for me, some of the interesting dynamics about this fight. But it's not like I think Rami Hamed is like the second coming. I think Gordo made a very great prescient point about neither one of these guys having a bright UFC future, except for maybe like fun action guy, like put him in a couple of striking fights and they get 5 fights in the UFC or something like that. I don't see either one of these guys as a long-term player, frankly. Pierce, please go ahead.
I guess I was just gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate. So I'm not advocating for Ding to be like a big player or anything. I just, when I'm looking to fade him, I'm looking at Rami, and I just don't think he has this like one hitter quitter with the hands. A lot of his knockouts recently came with the low kicks, and he's taken like 2 and 3 guys, 10 and 6 guys to decision. And it's like, if I want to fade Ding's striking defense, because I'm not gonna lie, he's hittable as shit, but it just seems like he doesn't give a fuck. So you need someone that's gonna be willing to stand in the pocket and trade. And I just don't know if Rami's got that punching power to check him on that aspect. But yeah, I mean, I get why you want to play Rami, but he's 100% more seasoned of the two. It's just sometimes in MMA, if you just got the bigger dick, you're gonna prevail.
Dude, this guy, Kerbin Zhang. Oh my God. Please, guys, forgive me for this one. If you're a native of the region, forgive me for this one. Kerbin Zhang Tulosibiaki. He has fought this guy 5 times, guys. Like, go back and just look through the record. The guy overall as a pro is 29 and 18. These guys either are their best friends or they hate each other. Like, they've just got this blood rivalry. Like, every 2 weeks we meet up and do this again. But it's crazy, man. To me, I feel like I've never seen that before. On a fighter that had a successful UFC career, they're fighting the same guys like 11 times in a row on the
Hey,
regional.
maybe he's attacking his family, a la Anthony Smith style. But
Yes.
I think we will see 5 fights in the future between Muhammad Mikheil and Koji Horiguchi and Ryzen. So maybe maybe they got some competition for most fights.
I love it. Let's run it. And somebody's got to give this guy Mikheil a contract. All he does is win fights. Nobody wants to sign him. It's unbelievable. Just goes to show you what kind of industry this is. It's not about winning fights, guys.
Hey, we'll
Forget
see
what they
him.
told you.
We'll see him on the Fury FC prelims down the line.
What is it that Dan Levy always says? The NFC. We'd love to welcome him to the NFC. Have a title fight over there. Next up, guys, the main event of the evening. It's a wrestler on wrestler crime. It is Mansour Abdul-Malik taking on Wes Schultz. Before I kick this over to one of our great guests to break this down, I got to just give the color that my mind was blown when I go to search Mansour Abdul-Malik, and the first result that came up on Google was him wrestling a guy from 2 towns over, named Nick McShay, that I knew, from when I was wrestling locally in this area. This was when he was 184 pounder or something, right? We're talking high school results, but you know me, I'm a curious guy. So I started watching all the way from there. And this is the guy that I ended up clicking through like 6-8 of his wrestling matches because I was like, just fell down the rabbit hole, right? And the guy can really wrestle. I could just tell you. And there's been matches where he goes out there and pin slays somebody in like 30 seconds, puts a 10-0 score on them in the first period. But there's also times where he's down like 5-4 and grits one out in the third period. So for me, just as a wrestler, I know the psychology behind it. And I'm always looking for, any kind of habit you could take, anything that the market might not price in. And it did just seem to me like he's a guy that has that winning attitude, that winning intangible. Like he finds a way to go get it early or he finds a way to go get it late. And I did like to see that. But without further ado, we'll kick this one over to our guy, Gordo. How do you feel about this one, my man? Main event matchup. What are you thinking for the main event?
Yeah, I also fell down that wrestling rabbit hole looking at the record of everything. You got University of Maryland versus University of Wyoming here for a bit too. It was a fun one to go out there. I don't have the same ties, I'm the wrestler like Liam is, but it was fun going and digging into it. Some interesting looks. I think if you looked at this from just a wiki capping perspective, it looked like Mansour was 1-11 at Maryland. You look at some stuff like that, but the guy is a powerful dude. The guy is a strong wrestler. You look at his UFC career, he's only his MMA career, only 26 years old, 5 wins, 100% round 1 finish rate. The guy is explosive. His ground and pound is terrifying. He just runs through these fighters. A weaker level of competition, but he has fought through adversity in his first pro fight. He will reign ground and pound. He is a phenomenal athlete in terms of explosiveness, in terms of going side to side. And he is someone who I would like to see go out there and really get into these brawls because he's got the athletic traits. He has the ability to go out there and land with fighting intention. He has these blast doubles and solid takedowns that put him in these dominant positions where he is just a terrifying figure from top position, and it's fun to watch. Wes Schultz may be a bit different. LFA actually posted an article on the guy and his wrestling career, which was funny to go out there and watch. I like the name, Party Time Schultz. It's a fun time to go out there and look, but a guy who's maybe not the most more powerful base. He does have a solid wrestling career as well, but he is someone who, although he has some solid offensive wrestling himself, he doesn't have that same power, doesn't have the same explosiveness. He himself can be caught in the back foot as well. Was out wrestled by Dylan Budka in that matchup there, was held down. I do think it leads towards, that's the image we all have in our head here. I think we have this powerful, dominant guy in MMA and Mansour Abdul-Malik, who went out there and has dominated everybody in that first round. For a guy, Wes Schultz, who's a bit older, who we've seen lose these longer wrestling bouts and stuff like that as well, and it leads it for a guy who maybe has this one-sided affair. And I think when we look at this line, it really favors towards the more athletic guy, the more dominant guy here in Mansour. But I do think we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves in terms of line wide. I'm picking Mansour Abdul-Malik to win. I think he's a more explosive guy. I think more times than not, he can get to top position and make Schultz quit with the power he has, with the way he's able to generate violence from top position. But trusting this guy who has never been out of the first round to go out there and do so at this high of a clip is something I don't know if I want to do too often. Wes Schultz is someone who at least we've seen him go a full 3 rounds. At least a guy who we know can wrestle as well in theory. So I'm a bit tentative to go out there and say, yes, Mansour Abdul-Malik is the next big thing. But yeah, I'm picking him to win this fight. The guy's terrifying. He's very explosive early on. I do think more times than not, it does end with a ground and pound finish from Malik. But I do think it could be a live entry on Schultz if it gets later. I've yet to see Malik really test in the later rounds, and I think it makes it for a very, very fun fight. I expect some scrambles. I expect some wrestling, and I do think Mansour is getting the better of it early. But who knows who's going to be still swinging in those later rounds if it gets there. Should be a fun one nonetheless.
Absolutely. First thing I got to address, you said he had a bad record at University of Maryland. I just want to clarify for people that don't know, because this is like inside baseball, wrestling nerd shit, right? But if you wrestle at University of Maryland, you're taking on a Big Ten schedule. And the Big Ten is the toughest conference in all of college wrestling. So it's like you're wrestling Penn State, Ohio State, University of Iowa. You're getting fucked, right? And University of Maryland, by the way, is like the lower tier of a Big Ten program. I don't say that out of disrespect. I wrestled D3. I was fucking dog shit, okay? You just look back. It's like you just got to understand the levels of wrestling. I do. And so it's like that's just the way it is. Maryland, a little bit easier program to become a part of necessarily, but it's also like you have to be a top 1% or 2%. The high school to college wrestling participatory rate is like 2.9%. Like D1, D2, and D3. Is it? There's not that many opportunities. So it's like of all the high school wrestlers in the country, these guys are both among, the top 2-3%, I would say, in terms of their results. Both state champions, undefeated their senior years. So a lot of great wrestling credentials, and I'll talk more about them when it swings around to me. But let's hear from the man himself, the man of the people, the Bird. My brother, how do you feel about this one? And also, I just got to address this question. Neither one of these guys sniffed the jockstrap of Bo Nickel on a wrestling mat. My brother, not even close. But they're both good wrestlers. That's no disrespect to them. That's just a credit to Bo Nickel and everything he's accomplished. Pierce, please go ahead, my brother. How do you see this one?
No, man. I think Wes Schultz could pin Bo Nickel if they wrestled back in the day, bro. Yeah, I don't. I get why everybody's on Mansour. I mean, like Gordo basically put it perfect. I mean, there's like 2 fights on him, one against like a bum, and then his last LFA fight against St. Galice that lasted like 1 minute. But I see a lot of people playing the under 1.5, which I get it. I do. My only concern with that aspect of the bet is that Schultz seems like a guy that will play guard or try to negate damage on the map. But Mansour, he hits hard. I mean, the ground and pound he landed in his last fight put his opponent out cold on like the second punch he landed, which was nuts. But yeah, maybe take it square and bet Malik by KO or KO1. Probably gonna have to play KO1. KO is probably gonna be incredibly juiced. But yeah, I don't have any hot takes on this. I mean, I think it's pretty binary fight, isn't it? Yeah, West Schultz live bet maybe, but yeah, like Liam likes to say, Mansour Abdul-Malik has some anthropomorphic advantages, and I would be hesitant playing West Schultz in this matchup.
Fair play, my brother. So here, I'm excited to dig into this a little bit, gentlemen. First of all, I'm a nerd when it comes to my note taking as well. So I did take down some notes about our guy, Wes the Party Schultz. He wrestled at University of Wyoming, but that wasn't like his primary home. He also wrestled D3, right, at University of Wisconsin Lacrosse. And I can just tell you guys, University of Wisconsin, period. Name them in D3, they're all fucking good. Every single one of them, they're really good at what they do. And, that school is no exception. He was a All-American in D3, very good. He was also a All-American and a national finalist in the National Junior College Wrestling Association. So he had a crazy wrestling career. To your point, I sourced a lot of that from that LFA article. I read through a lot of his information, but I also went through and watched some of his matches. I watched his interview as well. When you listen to him, he basically says like, he's more of a both these guys. What I love about them is they're kind of like speaking of my own heart, right? They said like I got into wrestling because I liked fighting. Like I wanted to just like figure out how to do this stuff because you need to know how to do it to fight. And like that doesn't always lead to the best wrestlers, but sometimes it leads to really, really good MMA fighters because they knew what they were all about from the beginning, which is like, yeah, I'm trying to get good at wrestling, but I'm ultimately just trying to get good at fighting and using this as like a avenue to compete in fighting. So Mansour Abdul-Malik, he goes out there and tries to, take your head off with punches. If he can get on top of you and punch you, great. Like he's just a very violent dude, comes out, he's got the skill, the strength, the ability. But the one thing I would say is when you look at the build of a guy like Mansour Abdul-Malik, he's going out there and finishing these guys in the first round absolutely like he's supposed to, right? He's taking care of them accordingly. But I do have my slight concerns about how a fight looks where, number one, he comes out and he brings that same energy, that same intensity, but maybe the finish doesn't materialize, right? It's like you've got now, instead of one of these cans on the regional scene, to be respectful, it's like 1-1 guys, 0-1 guys. Like, they're just not guys that have like long proven track records. Wes Schultz has had a bunch of amateur fights. He's had a bunch of professional fights. Not a guy who's just going out there and getting cleaned up in the first round or something like that, right? So you look at Wes Schultz and what he brings to the table. You go back and watch that Kimura that he got in. Did you guys watch that fight by chance? I think it was an amateur fight. He got Kimura'd back in the day. And I went and watched that because, like I said, if somebody's lost a fight, and if they're on Contender Series, I always go back and watch because I'm like, let's see where the rubber met the road here and what happened. And what I saw in that fight is he never tapped. He has his arm like completely behind his back. And it looked like I'd have tapped, 30 seconds ago. It's like the arm just looked completely out of place and the referee stops it. So the referee like jumps in and intervenes and he looks at the ref and goes, man, I didn't tap. And the guy's like, dude, your arm was like crazy, like twisted though. And he's like, I'm really flexible, but I understand. And thank you. Like, he basically was just like Robbie Lawler with Ben Askren, right? Where he's like, I wasn't out to Herb Dean. And then he's like, you're a great fucking ref. It's all good. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that was like his reaction after. He's like, fuck, okay, like whatever, just move it up, flush it. Because he felt like I didn't lose the fight. So it's like no skin off my nose, right? And that is kind of what it looked like to me. If you guys go back and watch, he takes him down literally in like 1 second, dominates from top position for most of the round and stuff. And then like round two, he makes one mistake. This guy latches onto the Kimura. I don't think that guy ever fought again. I think that guy basically was like, yo, I will never get this lucky again. Thank you anyways. It was a great run and never fought again. Like, I just think Wes like learned a lesson from that, right? To go out there and lose to Dylan Budka, it's like, yeah, not a great look, but Dylan Budka brings the same kind of skill set to the table, and he's a grinder. He's 15 minutes. I'll push you into the fence. I don't care. Right? I'll hump your leg. I don't care. And meanwhile, it's like, okay, if this is a fight where he gets stuck on bottom the whole 15 minutes, he's going to lose the fight. No doubt about that. But it's like, he's kind of a jiu-jitsu guy. Like, he's a little bit more flowy. He's a little bit more of a funk wrestler, right? Like, if you look at him, guys that are built like that are super flexible and shit, you can't be everything. You can't be, I'm super strong and also fucking throw my arms all over the place and put it behind my head. It's like, you kind of got to pick your lane. If somebody puts my arm behind my head, it's all over for me. Like, ping, no, everything's going to start popping. But I'm pretty strong. Like, you got to make these trade-offs. For Wes Schultz, he's one of these guys that, like, probably doesn't seem like much until he's on you, like putting a ride in and stuff, and then you can't get away. You know, he's just like one of those guys who will then stick to you when he gets to the back and stuff like that. He takes a lot of chances, though. So he'll, like, fall over the top sometimes and make a few mistakes. He's a pure Vita, BJJ guy. Sometimes you see that from those guys. But I think that ultimately, like, he's a guy that is going to probably go out there with an ability to compete for 15 minutes if he doesn't get killed in round one. Meaning, like, he has the cardio. He's shown he's gone to decision several times. So it's like, if that's the case, you got one guy you're pretty sure can go out there and put this pace out for 15 minutes, and you got another guy who is very explosive, comes out to kill in round one. That we know that that's a style that often is detrimental to your success in round 2 and 3. So it's just like, I think Mansour Abdul-Malik is, for me, the better athlete, more explosive, more likely to win round 1, deserved favorite for all those reasons. But then it's like, how big of a favorite should he be against the guy who's more experienced, been out there more times? It's not like there's like a crazy age gap or a huge size gap. It's like both these guys kind of know what to expect. And by the way, Mansour Abdul-Malik isn't a guy who's going to like sprawl, brawl, keep it upright 100% of the time. He's willing to go out there and wrestle and mix it up and take some chances on the ground himself, go for big ground and pound and take these big positions where, you know, you give space. And when you give space, people are going to start entering legs. They're going to start grabbing a hold of you, trying to wrestle up. Then it becomes a much more interesting fight because a lot of these guys don't have a hope or a fucking prayer of wrestling with Mansour Abdul-Malik, right? There's some guy on the regional scene that does kickboxing and he's like, what the fuck is this dude doing on top of me? There's no getting back up from that. But if you're a wrestler by trade, it's not going to be surprising that somebody's like a big, strong guy on top of you one time. It's like, okay, it happens. Get back up. You know, keep working, grab wrist, work back up. And if you have that ability to keep the fight going, one of the things I will share from my experience as well is like, I used to go into club wrestling at University of Buffalo. I met a bunch of MMA guys there, professional MMA guys that would come in and get rounds with us and stuff. It was an awesome experience. But one thing I noticed is me and the guy who was running the club would both drill together all the time because he wrestled D1, I wrestled D3, but we had like drill master coaches who were just like, go, go, go. Like, just when you're working, you're working. And some of these other guys were just there. It's club, right? They're just like there to mess around and like do whatever. But we were like there to get reps and rounds and like try and improve and stuff like that. And just like at a pace, right? So he's not going to be unfamiliar with like a heavy wrestling pace. The thing Malik needs to do is damage him. Like beat him up with strikes, bloody him, batter him in the first round. That's how you break this guy. I just don't think it's going to be as easy as like he just goes out there and out wrestles him for 15. If it's wrestling for 15 minutes, I think that's a much more competitive fight. If it's, you know, who can do more damage in the first round, Wes Schultz is going to get blown out of the water. So for me, I think Wes Schultz is a smart guy. I don't think he's an idiot. I think he kind of understands where his bread is buttered in fighting. I don't think he's like, you know what I should do? I should go out there and try and trade bombs with this guy on the feet. I think he's going to try and make this a wrestling match and see if this guy can go into deep waters with him. And like I said, I've seen him go chase it down in the 6th minute of a wrestling match. That's a different thing than when you come out there and you try and slug somebody's head off. Number one thing that causes you to get tired is missing punches. So if he's out there and he's doing the Beneil Dariush, throwing ground and pound so hard, he's punching the ground, he's going to be tired in 2 minutes. And then it's like, fuck, like now this guy's back up to his feet. What do I do? That's the only thing I worry about. I talk about all the time. Contender Series brings certain things out of people. They fight aggressive. They come out crazy. Some people adrenaline dump. They fight against type. Some people go like, screw wrestling. That's all I know, but I'm throwing hands on the feet. And then like, sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. It's a high risk show. So when you talk about a high risk show with two guys that both have a lot on the line here, both, again, young guys, now we're talking more about the loner Kavanagh types of guys. These guys can both fight in the UFC, in my humble opinion, right? He lost to Dylan Budka. It wasn't like, oh my God, Dylan Budka washed him in every fight. He'll never fight again. It's like, okay, Dylan Budka's in the UFC today. He's having UFC fights. It's like, okay, he went out there, he lost that fight. He's a young guy, still getting experience. I feel like this is a spot where I believe both these guys could win UFC fights. So personally, I think the better athlete, Mansour Abdul-Malik, but I'm not convinced that Wes Schultz is like a useless fighter, some guy that they just brought in as cannon fodder. I don't see that. So I see both these guys being solid. Go ahead, please.
Liam, this is the way you talk. It's kind of inspiring some confidence into a dog shot. I mean, think about it just from like a conceptual standpoint. This line in this breakdown that we see a lot of people give about this fight, it's given Dana White Contender Series like 101. This is a trap. Could it be a trap? I mean, you look at Wes Schultz, it's like he's a better MMA fighter, I think, in all aspects of the game outside of the wrestling aspect and the power. But he knows how to strike. Abdul-Malik, we don't know if he can strike. He's been deep, like you said. We know he while his cardio isn't like some amazing weapon, I mean, we know he can hang late in fights. And what happens, like, theoretically, if Mansour gives up the back and Schultz puts in 2 hooks? Like, I don't know what this guy's subs defense is going to look like. And while I think the live bet angle is good, I think a sneaky prop we could maybe attack is a submission prop for Wes Schultz, because I know his jiu-jitsu is like what he relies on. The kid's got sneaky back takes, so maybe Elias Theodorou 2.0 is going to get a submission come Tuesday night. But yeah, I like your breakdown on that fight, man. I think it's not just how we're looking at it from like a wiki capping perspective. We kind of just have to think about the stuff we don't know, because that's how betting is. It's a bit of a puzzle, and we're going to try to solve it.
No, I like that too. I think when we look at this as a whole, I'm not going to go out there and change. I'm sticking with my point. I do think more times than not, Blake goes out there, wins this fight.
But me too, by the way. I think he's a deserved favorite. It's all a numbers game.
Oh, for sure. But you know what? When you look at this, when you factor in not only the rate at which underdogs win on Dana White Contender Series, but the low level of competition, the way this fight can play out, especially if it's going to be extended to these spots where Wes Schultz cannot go out there and have the advantage, I think it leads to potential dog shot. I think it could look to be a wide line. And although a live betting angle is where I would favor, it's not like we're not getting a good enough line anyways to go out there and maybe take a shot on him here. So if you are agreeing with Liam, which I don't mind the shot there too, it may actually be party time.
And ultimately for me, the other thing that I think is important to remember, go back and watch the first fight from Mansour Abdul-Malik's career. Guys, he was like borderline unconscious on his feet, like 30 seconds into the fight. Is he a tough bastard? Hell yeah. Did he get back into the fight? Yeah. Did that guy regret punching him in the face after? I'm probably sure he did. But when you just look back at that, like if that guy was a little bit better, we could be talking about he's already got 1 KO loss in his career in like 30 seconds, right? Where he just like went out there and his confidence is high, but he goes with his chin high as well, right? He's like trying to kill you. He's throwing heavy shots. He's getting in there. He's getting behind his shots. But when you do that, you're just there to be hit as well. So again, it's just like for me, I don't see a guy who's like a defensive savant who's got all these answers. Like when I talk about somebody who's a big favorite, I want them to have, the plan B where Arman Sarukian gets dropped by what's his name? Neto BJJ, right? He's literally like out on his feet and still can get the takedown and get on top. That's a favorite, right? Like somebody that, oh, shit went wrong. Let me bail myself out. Like, no problem. I have another answer. I have a backup plan. I have this other solution. I just don't know that we have that from Mansour Abdul-Malik. So it's not to say he can't cover this line. I just think it's a little bit more speculative. Whereas if you're going to take a speculative investment, I'd rather get the 3-to-1 ROI, right? It's like that for me is just the way I approach this game. And especially with Contender Series, guys, oftentimes we've been seeing chalk come through so far this year in the UFC. And that's just, do I expect it to change at some point? Yes, but it hasn't yet. So I'm just observing what's happening, right? It's just been a chalky year in the UFC. Last year, the Contender Series had a ton of dogs come through, a ton of main event dogs come through. It's a show that invites a lot of variance. And so I just think one thing that traps a lot of people is getting behind, like let's parlay everything on the card. Let's just go, 5-leg parlays and all this stuff. We've done it before on this show, right? Given DJ parlays that hit like 4 legs, 3 legs, 5 legs, but you got to understand going in, that's low percentage, right? Whereas like if you can hit one of these big plus money underdogs, you can pay for the whole night. So that's kind of the way that I approach this, especially when people are going to fight against type. They're going to stand and trade. They're going to take a lot of risks. Count me in for underdogs in those kind of scenarios because, guys, I can tell you, even good bets on favorites don't cash on Contender Series. Believe me, I bet Charlie Campbell minus 150 against, what's his name, Chris Duncan. Guys, if they run that back in the UFC, he's a substantial favorite. Believe me. He went out there, he dominated every second of the fight, and then bing, bing, and he's out. It's like, you remember sometimes that this is the stupidest sport in the world, right? Love it. Great sport. Also the dumbest sport ever created. So just remember that going in. Like, dumb shit will happen. Guys will do dumb things. Carl Williams over the weekend, everybody says, how he's going to go out there and wrestle. Doesn't even attempt takedowns, right? And then they're frustrated after the fact. It's like, you're betting on cage fighters, right? You're betting on these guys that don't always make the best decisions. When you're laying the heavy price tags, that's where it can come back and bite you. So you got to just be careful and make sure, does it check all my boxes, right? Especially with chalk. But in any case, guys, great night of fights. I'm excited for it. We start off with a banger. We end off with a banger. I think we're getting a couple contracts out of those two fights and hopefully a couple others as well. I'm going to give the floor to my guy, Pierce. Anything that you want to plug, anything that you want to get off your chest, anything you got to say to the people. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your breakdowns, and you're welcome anytime, my brother.
Oh, man, yeah, I don't really have much to plug, but thank you guys for having me on. You know, we had the good vibes last year, and we got our boy Torres Finney coming back next week. So, you know, we're gonna bring the vibes next week as well. And yeah, in case anybody missed it, I can just give my quick recap real quick. First fight, Loner Kavanagh, Antoine Ho. I think Loner is a special prospect. I think Ho is a good prospect too, but I'm gonna stick with my guns. I think Loner is going to win, money line, no value. Maybe the under is a good bet there. And then we got Jose Delgado Juarez. This is probably the one bet. I don't have any bets. This could potentially be the one bet I'm going to have on the card. I like Juarez as a dog solely on the fact that I think late in the fight he could have success with the boxing, but I do worry he gets taken down and could get stuck on his back. But plus 270, I'm willing to take the risk. And Bruno Lopes versus Mikheil. Didn't really look too much into that, but like Liam said, Bruno by submission is going to bring out the party time to, come Tuesday. And then Ming Ding versus Rami Hamad. I think Ming Ding's the rightful favorite. I'm looking for his KO prop if I can get like plus 200, plus 175. Late KO on Ding would be cool too, maybe round 2 or round 3. I think he's going to break Rami late. And then main event, it's either going to be Schultz cooks late or Abdul-Malik gets round 1 KO. It's a pretty binary fight in my eyes, but yeah, no way I could play Mansour at minus 300 considering the question marks. But oh yeah, I'll say one more thing. I have a bet MMA tips. It's Oil Check. I think just Oil Check MMA. It's yeah, it's free picks, so I ain't charging nobody here. But yeah,
Free Big
appreciate
Bird, free Big Bird, bro. They
free
got a
Big Bird,
free.
man. Hey, bro, they took me off. They blacklisted my old account, but you know, we're back. We're making the people money, and you know, that's what I'm here to do, man. I'm gonna make some money and y'all gonna make some money with me. And we're gonna go on this ride to the top, baby. Let's go.
Hell yeah. I love to hear it. Thank you for being here, my brother. An absolute short notice. My man, Dan Ega's got nothing on you, bro. My man was in the chat. He said, I'm here. I'm ready to rumble. I'm on weight. Appreciate you, dude. Thank you for stepping up. Great analysis, as always. Always a blast talking with you. My brother, Gordo, I want to just say this as I pass it to you, my brother, the open floor. Guys, we're going to be next week on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. So right now, before anything else, go ahead and subscribe to Plays and Fades YouTube channel and make sure you hit that bell for notifications so that way when we go live, you're there and we're there. We'd love to see you there. Gordo, please tell the people where they can find you, my brother.
Oh, my favorite time of year talking Dana White Contender Series. I'm looking forward to it. Happy to break it down with you as always. So many good memories talking Dana White Contender Series. Such a good time. So looking forward to doing it one more time. Pierce, you're always welcome on the Plays of Fade YouTube channel. I'll be texting you for sure. Maybe we'll see you there next week. Should be a good time. Maybe do Monday next week. We'll have to see. The lines where that ends up. We'll keep you posted. Check out Liam on Twitter. Check out all that fun stuff. In terms of me, let's give me a quick breakdowns as well. I have no action locked in yet. I'm waiting for props, but I'll definitely have some. That's for sure. You check me on Twitter at Gordo to see what I end up with. First Friday night, extremely fun one. 23-year-old Antoine Ho, I think, is extremely explosive. I think if there's a finish that materializes in this fight, it's probably on the Antoine Ho side. Because of that, I might play some finish only, but I think more times than not, Loner Kavanagh has a minute-winning potential. I like his in-and-out movement. I like his potential wrestling. I like his potential volume. I do think it's going to be a very, very high-level fight. I will look to see where props come out on potentially Antoine Ho KO or finish only line. You look at Delgado versus Ernie Juarez. Like we mentioned, dog or pass here for Ernie Juarez. I think that although gun to my head, Delgado's a more skilled fighter. I think he has his flaws. He's coming in on short notice. Ernie Juarez is a consistent product who will go forward, who will wrestle box, who will throw adversity towards a guy like Delgado. I do think that makes it for a pretty interesting spot here in the underdog, who is at a very juicy price tag. Dogger pass for Juarez in what should be a fun fight. The next one is the one bet I'll be making for sure is the under in this spot here. Lopes versus Sazhiniani. I think a finish materializes very often in this fight. Lopes is the clear ground dominant fighter in this matchup, getting the return here, the ace side here, a guy who's had success in LFA, a guy who is very dominant from top position against a guy Sazhiniani who, yes, throws extremely powerful shots in the feet and is live for a KO in his own right, but struggles on the ground. It's definitely fought a lower level competition and is smaller for the weight class. I do think it makes it for either Lopes by submission, Sazhiniani by KO on the feet if Bruno Lopes does stay in the pocket too long, but hopefully he's learned from his mistakes. I do like the under in that one. The next one is one that I don't know if I want too much involvement in, a lower level spot, Meng, Rami Hamed. I think there might be some leverage on the underdog in Rami Hamed because I do think he has some potential to go out there and, you know what, utilize the leg kicks, utilize the technical kickboxing. But truthfully, both these guys have no ground game. So if someone wrestles, we could be thrown for a loop. I do think Meng will go forward when the optics that way. So I don't know how much of a part I want in this one unless some props really catch my eye. And the main event, I think Mansour Abdul-Malik has more round and finish equity. I think more times than not, for looking at a way this fight finishes, it's by early KO for someone like the ground and pound of Malik. But I do think as the fight goes on, West Schultz gives a good late entry. It should be a fun fight, a lot of wrestling exchanges, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm hyped for it, man. It should be a great time. Tuesday night fights is always great, so be sure to check us out next week as well. We have 10 weeks of this, and you guys will be missing it after. So check out Liam, check out Pierce. I appreciate you guys, and best of luck.
My absolute brother. Appreciate it. I'm glad that we're back in business this year. Excited to continue breaking down all these fights. I'll give my quick recap as well. I'm thinking that in the first fight, it would be Antoine Ho or pass for me at the current odds. I do think it's just a little bit closer than the odds, currently entail, right? I think Loner Kavanagh, good fighter. He's going to need to get off on his leg kicks, get the balance of Antoine Ho off because he's a good switch stance fighter. He likes to explode into his shifting hooks. And I think that's the biggest danger for Loner Kavanagh. He does take some damage in his fights. He's been hurt. He's been dropped before. He's also been submitted on the ground. And so I think those are the potential paths to victory where Antoine Ho could potentially outperform his price in this spot. 2 undefeated fighters, but give me the guy on a longer win streak who's also had a ton of amateur experience in that one. Then, guys, I think that the next underdog is live as well. I have to do more research on this fight. Like I said, not the one that I've done the most research on, but Ernie Juarez, pretty simple bread and butter game. He's going to come forward. He's going to swing. He's going to go for takedowns. He's going to try and keep it basic. I don't rate his level of competition as particularly high, but I could say the same thing about Delgado. I think he looks a little more impressive, a little more spinning shit, a little bit more finesse to his game, but I also think that he's a guy that can be grounded. He got almost, borderline knocked out in a fight that he ended up winning, but he literally was like sat down in the first minute and 30 seconds. So I think that this is a guy that also takes a lot of chances on the feet. He's there to be hit. His hands do not come back. Like there's no discipline with his hand positioning. So when he's throwing his kicks, he's just like here, right? It's just no defense whatsoever of the head, the chin, any of the soft spots. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. If Juarez is committed to that come forward boxing game plan where he can land. But I also think if he sits back and just tries to play this from outside of range, he's going to get killed. So, violent fight, fun one. Next up, I think Bruno Lopes is going to win the fight by submission. I just didn't trust what I saw from this guy on the ground. He's also been knocked out before. I couldn't find that footage, but just seems to me like a guy I don't really trust his ability to take damage. In a lot of these fights, he's getting hurt by terrible fighters in my view, but then he's able to take them down, wrestle them, dominate from on top. I don't think he's going to do that to Bruno Lopes. So that ultimately is the difference maker for me here. But Bruno Lopes has fumbled the bag as a favorite before. Buyer beware. Meng Ding, I wasn't impressed. I'll just be frank. I think that he's probably got the better cardio. He's a little bit more, prepared for this opportunity. But his opponent, comfortable in a kickboxing affair. I think if this fight plays out on the feet, probably plays out pretty close. But maybe you favor the guy with better cardio. Ultimately, it looks like a stay away from me, but I'll do a little bit more research because I was slightly intrigued by the underdog just watching Meng Ding's losses. I was not impressed by his performances. And lastly, guys, Mansour Abdul-Malik and West Schultz. I think it's a fascinating fight. 2 great wrestlers, 2 guys that are going to go out there and put on a scrap. But I just ultimately think West Schultz is getting a little bit of disrespect at the window because he kind of looks like a, softer bellied white guy. And meanwhile, the other guy looks very built up and muscular. And also he's very confident. He's a very introspective guy. He's a smart guy in his own right. But the one thing I always worry about is these guys that haven't lost before. It's a lot of pressure that they carry into these fights. Look at Danny Barlow's underperformance, in my humble opinion, over the weekend. He had talked about before the fact, he's like, I'm dealing with a lot of pressure being undefeated. Then he goes out there and lays a freaking egg in his feature bout on the card, right? These are the kind of things that can happen to undefeated fighters. Wes Schultz has gone out there and tasted defeat a couple times, right? Meanwhile, this guy, he's gone out there, he's had a ton of success all very early. What happens if he starts to face adversity out there in the cage? It's a lot different than a wrestling match. You're getting hurt, you're getting damaged, or you could potentially get choked, strangled, unconscious. So it doesn't matter how tough a guy you are. It doesn't matter how good you are. If somebody gets your back, puts you in a bad position. So I think ultimately we're in for a great scrap, and Mansour Abdul-Malik could make himself a star with a huge knockout win, right? But I just think the longer the fight goes, the more you'll see Wes Schultz's experience shine through. He's had a lot of amateur fights. He's had some pro fights go the distance. I think that could pay dividends when you're talking about a big underdog in a main event opportunity. So for me, great fights, great scraps, great guests, most importantly, and the sharpest chat in the goddamn game. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. I love each and every one of you guys. Thank you all for being here. God bless you all. Thank you for the support. Hit subscribe, drop a like on the video. Come back next time. We're doing it all again. Thanks, everybody. Make sure, plays and fades, don't miss it. Next week, check on Twitter for the announcements, at LiamPicksFights, at Gordo Gambles, and at Big Bird. I don't remember the numbers, but shout out to our boy Pierce. Thank you, guys. Great job. Shout out to Gordo, shout out to Pierce, and shout out to the chat.